Brian, what's your appreciation? A series of delegations, and especially if a delegation now after America comes from Japan, what's the indication that's going out from Taiwan to China?
So it is more sensitive at this juncture that there is a Japanese delegation, but this was expected ahead of time. After the assassination of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Taiwan's Vice President William Lai traveled to Japan. This preceded the Pelosi visit and the ensuing Chinese reactions to the Pelosi visit, but this was the highest-ranking diplomatic visit by a Taiwanese government official to Japan in 50 years. And so it was expected that after that, Japan would follow suit with another delegation sent to Taiwan as another show of support, as another show of strong ties. It's more sensitive at this juncture. One notes that also, though, the missiles fired by China that passed over Taiwan, some of them actually ended up in Japan's exclusive economic zones, and so Chinese threats are directed not only at Taiwan, but also at Japan, which is the nearest country at hand that would potentially come to Taiwan's aid in the event of an invasion, given strong historical ties, also the proximity of Okinawa to Japan, to Taiwan, for example, closer to the rest of the Japanese archipelago to Taiwan than actually to the rest of Japan.
Could this have an impact on elections? Of course, the elections just at the level of mayor, but how significant are those elections in Taiwan? And is there an apprehension that things could go out of hand for President Tsai Ing-wen or for the DPP here in Taiwan? Brian?
So this is actually a very interesting question as to why exactly China continues to carry out these live fire drills or military threats, because usually the reaction is support for the DPP. It is even possible that the DPP would have taken a hit in midterms on primarily domestic but not international policies, because that's not the only consideration by which Taiwanese vote. Domestic policy, economic issues, for example, or social issues also are important. I don't think actually China has much of a chance. Its own proxies in Taiwan, the KMT, now are suffering. They actually, perhaps their election chances have been dashed by China's live fire exercises. And so in this sense, perhaps they have actually handed victory to the DPP. And China, oftentimes, is acting to shoot its own foot when it comes to threatening Taiwan, because what happens is a consolidation of identity or of willingness to stand up in the face of Chinese threats.
Okay. But Admiral Sinha, will the United States actually intervene, and what would intervention mean? I mean, what would that intervention mean? You wargame as a sailor, sir. You wargame naval moves all times, and you know, you wargame steps. Do you see this escalating into a full-blown conflict between China and Taiwan? And what role do you see the United States play here?
It's very unlikely, Gaurav, that it will escalate into a full-fledged war. There are 2-3 pointers in this direction. One is that US has very clearly said that in case of any physical occupation, the Americans will come to the assistance of Taiwan, number one. And secondly, you know, Taiwan was never part of the Communist China. In fact, when the Communist China, the PRC, declared their name as PRC, Communists took over. By then, Chiang Kai-shek had already moved to Taiwan with his supporters and forces. So to say that Taiwan is part of China and they believe in one China policy is all absolutely rubbish, because it was never part of Communist China at all in the history. That is number one. The second point that you made was, will it escalate? My sense is that it will not escalate to full warfare. One of the reasons that I just mentioned. And second big reason is that China themselves have been saying that they will do a peaceful reunification, but this, this bullying and this absolutely mindless exercise that they carried against no opposition, that has actually shown the world that China can go to an extent that was not expected. And therefore, these delegations which are going, they are primarily to tell China that the bullying will not work. Everybody is in support of Taiwan, both politically and militarily, if it comes to that. I feel that there is not going to be war, mainly because it does not suit China. China's main aim in the world is to replace the US from the top slot, both economically and militarily. And if there is a war, China is likely to be the biggest loser.